And boy, Dregs, what a Friday the National Hockey League had. We were just sort of coming down off the high of a trade here in Edmonton, and then all of a sudden, boom, Quinn Hughes gets moved out as well. So let's start with the Edmonton deal, because it was a very interesting reaction throughout the day here in the city, man. I'll be honest with you. It was what was that one text we had come in? It was like, Stan Bowman has done the unthinkable. He's acquired a goalie and pissed off the fan base at the same time. So it was. Oh yeah, they got a goalie, but maybe they gave up too much. It was I don't know how was this deal viewed outside of the market, I guess.
Well, I mean, largely it's viewed as change for the sake of change, but that's not a criticism. Sometimes that works, but I think largely everybody looks at the goaltending and the fact that it's evolved into a problem, whether or not that's in the eye of the fan base, in the eye of the media, or that's the reality. So from my perspective, Bowman and company deserve some credit. But, you do have to look at the pieces involved here, right? Tristan Jarry isn't that far removed from being on waivers. So are you certain that he's an upgrade or as good or even marginally better than Stu Skinner? And you can't be certain. You can't. But again, based on the whirlwind of negativity that just seemed to be swirling around the team, it has basically all season long. And you can dive into last year, maybe even the year before. And look, we can recognize that, Stu Skinner and Cal Pickard both had significant roles in getting the Oilers to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, but the Oilers didn't win. So, again, I'm supporting the idea of change for the sake of change. I look at Kulak. In my mind, he has the potential of being a top four defenseman. Not always flashy, but a trusted defenseman. And I think that the fan base could recognize that as well. The kid that they get from Nashville, Stastny, I did some work around the Preds and just got a read on the type of player that he is. The feedback that I'm getting or got on Friday was that, okay, limited offensively, but the rest of his game is solid. He can skate, so he's not going to struggle with pace. He's not really a kid. Was he 25? So you've got to handle, even though his games in the National Hockey League are below 100, I think you still have a fairly educated idea of the type of defenseman he's going to be. Sound defensively. I'm told from, an analyst perspective, his gap work is terrific. So you live with that piece for the sake of change. So if you're willing to call it a wash, then you have to look at, the 2 draft picks that were included in this trade as well. And I think that in part, even though you don't know what those draft picks are ever going to materialize into, that's where the overpay starts to get real. And I think that in part is the issue. You had to throw in Kulak, probably didn't want to. The money has to work, but in addition to all of that, you have to throw in 2 draft picks to just make it possible and live with the uncertainty.
Dregs, one of the things that kind of popped up was the timing of it. And I guess there's a couple of ways to look at it. We sort of viewed it as, the team, the management group, somewhat like the fan base was seeing where this team was at right now. And they'd been playing pretty well for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And Skinner had a good 6-game stretch as well. But, this is something that would have, started beyond just Friday. It's not like they called on Friday and was like, hey, what do you think of this deal? Yeah. They obviously would have been working on it. So the timing of it's interesting because you can look at it and go, well, they've been playing well, but management must be seeing that goaltending is such an issue. They got to pull the trigger on it. And then I also like the fact that you go get your goalie now. You got 2.5 months to evaluate your team before the deadline, which I think makes it make sense to me. But what do you think of the timing of it?
I like it, and then again, I think the Oilers deserve some credit for that. We're pretty well connected with Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And even though the speculation has been there for quite some time, connecting the Oilers to Tristan Jarry, the timing from Dubas's standpoint wasn't right. It wasn't right. Tristan Jarry in his mind was still an important piece. The Penguins are still very much wanting to stay competitive. They're not throwing away this season. They don't think that they're doing that by bringing Stu Skinner into the mix. So why the timing? And it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that they were waiting for Stan Bowman or somebody else to step up in a bigger way.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. I mean, whether it was Kulak, whether it was the draft picks, whether it was all of the above, I mean, they finally got to a place, Edmonton that is, where Dubas said, all right, it's not getting better moving forward, so I'm going to make that deal now. So from a timing perspective, I always applaud the clubs guys who jump into the trade pool, especially when you're making a significant change here. It reminds me of Colorado a year ago. Not, they didn't move out Cal Pickard as well and clean out their goalie cash. But why wouldn't you want Tristan Jarry to come in and try and solidify his game in an Oilers uniform for the longer run, right? It's different than Quinn Hughes going to Minnesota because we're talking about a superstar player in Quinn Hughes. But the timing is the same, right? And the Minnesota Wild probably you could make a case overpay to acquire Quinn Hughes. Why'd they do it? They did it because they want Quinn Hughes to settle in with the Wild and look like he settled in yesterday. Pay the dividends that they know he's going to pay for the remainder of this season, playoffs, plus next year, playoffs. And then if there's an extension that goes along with that, that's great. So that's justifying the timing for me.
TSN's Darren Dreger joining us here. Nielsen Show, Dustin Nielsen, Lieutenant Eric, 95.7 Cruise FM, iHeart TuneIn. I just wanted your thoughts and go a little further on this Tuesday. We were going to our staff Christmas party Friday night, and that kind of came across the wire, capping a fantastic day on the trade market.
Crazy.
Do you see this as something that has legs in Minnesota? They gave up a pretty good. I mean, Vancouver getting a decent return for the guy, and some people
really
arguing
good.
a rental, but what do you make of Hughes, maybe perhaps staying long-term in Minnesota? And just as a second part, I know the roster trade freeze later on this week, Friday. You hearing any other rumblings, or do you think something else, or was it just kind of Friday and now we kind of sail on into next Friday as is?
No, we can't say that. I mean, that's possible because, look, it took the better part of a third of the regular season, for this sort of trade activity to finally, hit the cycle. So I'm open to everything. I am. There's nobody that was getting up Friday morning thinking that Quinn Hughes was getting traded. Nobody. And there's been miles of speculation. Oh, well, he's going back to the New Jersey Devils. Yes, Detroit is interested. Buffalo had been rumored because Buffalo has some younger pieces. Nobody talked about the Minnesota Wild taking a hard run. I mean, of late, and no one mainstream has had openly speculated. So that
wasn't Bill Guerin making meatballs or something?
Bill Guerin said he was making meatballs when he found out, right?
Well, no, when he got the call that the deal was done.
Yeah.
But, look, I mean, the reality is the teams that I talked about here in the East, Detroit, New Jersey, Buffalo, they weren't willing to part with the roster assets the Vancouver Canucks needed. So probably a week now, pushing 10 days, but let's say a week from this past Friday, that's when Minnesota entered the conversation and just said, hey, obviously we're not an Eastern Conference team, but we have interest in Quinn. Would you have interest in talking to us? And Jim Rutherford said, absolutely. Quinn Hughes didn't have trade protection. So as much as Jimmy wanted to do right by Quinn Hughes, which he has in this case, obviously the perfect scenario would have been to ship him off to the New Jersey Devils to play with his brothers, because that's why, again, the speculation until he signs a contract extension with Minnesota is going to continue to linger. But whether or not that translates into trade activity between now and the roster freeze, we'll have to wait and see. But it proves, and I got all the time in the world for Rutherford and for Guerin. I do, because I can't tell you a number of times Billy Guerin, who learned from arguably one of the best in Rutherford while they worked together in Pittsburgh, has told me the best trades are the trades that work out for everyone. So Billy Guerin isn't trying to nitpick the Vancouver Canucks, trying to squirrel or sneak a piece in there that he knows isn't quite what Vancouver was looking. And no, like, have you, aside from watching, I mean, you guys watch a ton of hockey. This Zeev Buium might end up being as good as Quinn Hughes. He might.
He's got real deal potential, man. Yeah.
He scored last year.
He does, yeah.
I mean, this kid is a special player. And then on top of that, you get two good forwards in Marco Rossi and Liam Ogren and a first-round draft pick in 26. And that draft in that first round is going to be deep. So Billy Guerin doesn't mess around. Hey, there's always commentary that comes from the Canadian markets, and Edmonton was right at the top of the list. Hey, we're all in. We're all in. No, you're all in when you trade 4 pieces like the Minnesota Wild did for a superstar player in Quinn Hughes that you aren't sure you're going to be able to maintain and hold on to for more than this season and next. That's what grabbing your you-know-whats and giving them a squeeze is all about when you talk about being all in the National Hockey League.
Dregs, before I let you go, just a little bit more of a focus on the Canucks because like Eric said, and I think you would agree, pretty good return. We just went through that. So what's next for Vancouver? I mean, they had the JT Miller-Pedersen thing, and they sorted that out with Miller. Now Hughes wasn't happy. They sorted that out. Do things get worse in Vancouver? Do they stay where they are for a while? What happens next there?
All of the above. But they're okay with things getting worse, Dusty. They are. Because what that means is they will, and by they, we're talking about Jim Rutherford and Patrick Galvin. Jim Rutherford's legacy as president of the Vancouver Canucks is to leave this team better than when he arrived. Okay. And they've made some really, really bold decisions, but they did well by their players in getting pieces back. The JT Miller trade, all right, Philip Hedl hasn't worked out, because of injury, but they got decent return and they wanted to do right by JT Miller. So that's what they do. If things continue to not go well in Vancouver, they get an excellent draft pick, right? They put themselves in a draft position and they've got Minnesota's first round pick. So now you've got the young pieces that they acquired who are playing in the NHL for the Canucks right now. But in addition to that, you're going to get a couple of really nice draft picks. And I know in talking to Jimmy on Friday night, Jim Rutherford, very excited about looking at the future of the Vancouver Canucks. So Canucks fans may not feel that way because it doesn't look good right now, but they're not too far away from being good again.
Dregs, good stuff, man. We appreciate it. We'll do it again on Monday.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
There you go. That's Darren Dreger from TSN and the Ray and Dregs podcast.